This is Andy Tube. In this video I'm going to be working on the take-up lever system of Lala, this Singer Model 221 Featherweight. At the end of my previous video for the needle bar, I was talking about how this hinge screw here was loose, and when I first got Lala to be able to turn, she was frozen when I got her, but then when I got everything moving, I was getting a lot of binding and stuff up here because this screw was sticking out really far, and other parts of the take-up lever system were like rubbing on it and catching on it. So I took it out and looked at it. It's a hinge screw, not a hinge stud. Most of the machines I've done like this, it's just a stud that goes in there, and then someplace on the top or the back is a hole for a set screw that goes in and holds that stud in place. And it hinges so that when you turn, the hand wheel and everything's moving, that take-up lever can just hinge right on the stud. This was a screw, and every other hinge screw I've ever worked on, you just tighten it all the way. And when I did that, it was frozen again. The whole thing was frozen. So I finally looked at the parts manual. I found a parts manual and looked at it, and I found out that this washer was missing. It's supposed to be on the back side of the take-up lever link and before the hole in the casting or the body, and that gives it the correct spacing to line it up with the other parts that are on a hinge stud into the counterbalance behind the needle bar. And that's a very tightly made clearance system, those two holes, and it's even tricky getting it in and out because it just has to be perfect. So that explained what was going on, and I found one of these. I was fortunate that an acquaintance, she collects featherweights, and I just couldn't find one. I couldn't find one, and she asked me, and I gave her the part number and stuff. So she sold it to me for $5, including postage from, so that was great. I was lucky because I found one place selling the stud and the washer for $10 plus postage. So I got it, and I immediately took it up. Well, I dropped it, but after I got it and looked at it, I took it up to the local hardware store. And of course they don't have the exact same thing. I have yet to find any Singer original screw or washer or bolt or hinge screw that I can match at a hardware store. And other people have, and I know there's some screws here and there that do it. But these are as close as I could get. But they're about a 32nd of an inch different, and on the outside I think it was, and a 64th of an inch different on the inside diameter. So I mean, I'm like, wow, I was excited because that's the closest I'd ever gotten to any part. And this was 19 cents, okay? And it's steel. They didn't have a stainless steel in this size. But, so I'm going to put the original Simanco part on there and see if it fixes it. And I'm sure it will, but I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to take it off and I'm going to put on this 19-cent part just to see if it's close enough that it would work. That's a little background there, and I'll show you here. If you look at this stud screw, and you see the slot for the screwdriver, it should just stay there. That shouldn't move because the other parts are hinging on it. But watch that slot as I move. See how it's turning left? And this is lefty-loosey, right? So it's like, oh, no wonder that part got loose and was working its way out of the machine. That's what gave me the clue. Something's not right here. So let me take it out here and we'll talk about the screw stud for a moment, and then I'll slip this washer where it's supposed to go. I should have grabbed the screwdriver, sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to set, well, let me hold on to that, and let me put my 19-cent washer someplace I won't lose it. Now, I've talked about this many times, so sorry to repeat myself, but I have new viewers all the time. This is a hinge screw, so it's got threads like a screw, because it is a screw. But let me see if I turn this spotlight off here. There. See this smooth part up here before the head? It's a flat head screw. Big old strong head on it. But see this flat part here? It's smooth. It's bigger than the screw thread's diameter, but it's smaller than the head of the screw, and that's because it fits on this, it goes through this part, the connecting link here, and that fits on the hinging part, nice and smooth. Okay, so when you put a hinge screw in and tighten it, then it just stays there, but whatever part you're holding can move on that hinge part. So this thing is engineered to have the part and the washer behind the part and in there and tighten, and then everything is perfect and you don't get any binding or looseness, you know, that's just perfect. So I've got to put the hinge screw back in, but this washer has to be behind the part. Now sometimes they're not. Sometimes there is no washer. But you know it's behind the part because look, it won't go up to the head. So you couldn't put this and then put the part behind it and tighten it, right? There's just no way it could screw in far enough. So that tells you the part, of course, is going to hinge right behind the head of the screw, and then this will go on behind the part, and then the whole thing, like so, will be screwed in to the threaded hole in the aluminum casting of the machine. I think it's aluminum. It's heavy. Maybe it's metal. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's iron. I haven't really thought about it. Maybe it is iron. Anyway, sorry, got sidetracked there. So to get this in here, I'm going to get my little spring screwdriver and get this big old screw on the end. So once I get it there, I can, you know, put the screw in, and then I've got to get my part up in front. How am I going to do this here? Maybe I'll get the washer on here. Just use a little barbecue stick. Oh, it's tricky. And this machine is a little smaller. Actually, a lot smaller than some of the machines I work on. So it's kind of tight quarters. I guess I could take the needle bar out, but what if I kind of just hold that there for a moment? I knew I was going to be blocking your view a lot in this video. And get the connecting link loop up there and get it up over the over the washer. So I've got both pieces there now. I need to get my big old pointer out of there now. Oh brother. Okay. So the trick is when you have the washer back behind there, you've got to kind of line up the washer with the hole in the machine, right? And then you want to line up the connecting link, the part, over that hole so that you can get the end of the screw started in there. Oh my god, maybe if I turned it this way on this side of the camera. Sorry, here's my camera right there. It's kind of dark in there though, so I got a little spotlight set up and stuff. And now here's my problem. So you got to get it started. If that part doesn't go up on the hinge part of the screw, it just stops. So I'm going to kind of maneuver this connecting link until try and keep bouncing it up so that it'll get up on the hinge part of the screw, and it did. Now I can tighten it up all the way, see? But it gets kind of pinched in there, and you can force it and think that you're doing it right, but you're not. So the best way, and just going to snug this hinge screw up here. Whoops. The best way is to kind of jostle or jiggle the part when you're putting on a hinge screw. Okay, like on most of the machines I've done, there's a hinge screw for the lifting lever. This happens to have a pin, but you know, when you put that on, you kind of jiggle the part because you want it to slip up onto the hinge part of the screw. Alright, so now I've got this. Let's go ahead and turn this. It's moving nice and easy, so it's not binding up at all. But you see how the screw's not moving? Because this is the way it was engineered. So that connecting link is just hinging behind the head of the screw and the front of the washer. Nice. So I knew that would fix it, right? No worries. Okay, so now I'm going to take it out, and I have to say I'm kind of excited to try this 19-cent part. Not because it's 19 cents, but it's just like I've never gotten a part aftermarket, a non-Singer part, so close to an original Singer part. And I'm trying to remember some of the later models. People told me that, like, screws for the motor and the light and some parts like this, maybe the bed feet, that Singer just started using standard size screws. And I think it was in the 70s and stuff, but this is the oldest model I've worked on, 1939, and the newest was probably about a 77. And I've just never had much luck. I pull this out, I know that washer's going to fall in there. Okay. Get my little washer out of there. Okay, so now I'm going to try my replacement part. So it's a little bit smaller diameter outside, and the hole the inside diameter hole is a little bit bigger. And I'll show you how that looks, and that's the only thing I'm worried about. That it's a little bit smaller outside doesn't bother me too much. You know, it's still, the part is still going to be hinging in here, and I think it'll protect it. But that the screw is a little bit bigger than the, I mean the washer here is a little bit bigger than the threads. That's what worries me. Is there going to be play when the motor's running and the thing is hinging? Is it going to go clunk, 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 up and down or around or something? So that's what concerns me a little bit. So let me get my tools ready. I think it's got a good chance of working, but and I would have preferred a stainless steel. This is steel, you know, but I would have preferred a stainless steel, just thinking it's going to last longer. But then what the heck, at 19 cents, you know, if it wears out in a few years, I guess I can afford to get another one, right? Okay, so if you had to do this, you wouldn't be having this trouble, because you're not going to do it with a camera in front of your nose, you know. Or maybe you would. I don't know. Let's see if I can get that. Whoops. Get that up enough to hold it so I don't drop it. And then there. Okay. I want to kind of wiggle everything around there to get that washer lined up with the hole so it doesn't block the hole for my screw to go in. Oop. Okay, let's see if we turn it like this. Maybe is that any good? Now see, it's locking up already. It doesn't want to get in there because there. I don't know if you noticed that, but when I pushed it up, it jumped up onto the hinge part of the screw, and now it's going in very well, just like the other one. Okay. And then you can push and pull with your finger near the screw to see if you have any play. If you got caught on the edge of the hinge part or on the edge of a washer, you'll get a little movement there, or you can feel a gap with your finger on the sides. Whoops. Let me get the better screwdriver here, and we'll tighten that up. And then let's turn it and see what happens. Up. Up. It's binding. Okay, let's see. Yep, well, darn, that's too bad. It's binding a little bit, so what I want to do is I'm going to loosen it up and re-tighten it to be sure that I've got everything seated in here properly. Because that hole in my center of my new washer is bigger. And I want to be sure that I've got the connecting link on the hinge part of the screw, and then the washer seated properly. It felt pretty good to me. Maybe I'll rotate this a little, the hand wheel, while I'm tightening it too. See if that oh, yeah. Boy, it's just a little binding right there. Doggone it. If I barely loosen it, I mean just a tad, then it's free and easy. And it's not loosening the screw. You see the slot isn't turning left. But I don't know how long that will last that way. Since I can't tighten the screw like I could all the way, boy, it's not very much. I don't know, maybe the screw could get broken in. So I guess that I'm happy I bought the original piece. I could use this aftermarket, generic washer. It's working right now. I could use it and keep an eye on it and see if over time it did work loose. Right now it's as smooth as the other piece. So in between cuts here, I measured the thickness, and I thought they were the same, but I bought a new digital caliper, and this new washer is about 1/64th of an inch thinner. So just like the new washer was, a little bit outside diameter smaller, a little tiny bit bigger inside diameter, now it's a little tiny bit thinner also. And that, I know, can affect the clearance. I don't know if you can see. It's just barely a difference. Well, now I'm tightening it and it seems to be working better. So maybe because it's just a new washer, one side is kind of polished and the other side isn't. Actually, I like it now. Okay, I tightened it and it is working okay. How about that? I like it. I'm going to keep an eye on that as I work along the machine, but I think it's a winner. I think my 19-cent washer, and I haven't oiled any of these parts yet either, come to think of it, So I'm going to call it a success that my 19-cent washer worked as good as the original Singer washer. How about that? Okay, so that's the first part of the video here. If you want to continue with me, I plan to take out this take-up lever so that I can clean it, and I want to be able to get inside the machine and clean it very well, since I'm not going to be able to clean it the normal way I do in the shower. And if you want to learn how to take off your take-up lever, just stick with me, and I'm going to describe how Singer says to take it off in their service manual, and I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to do their method, and I'll show you a method of my own to take it off that may have a little bit more fiddling around and work to do, but for myself, I think it will have less consequences. So if you'd like to stay with me for that, we'll continue. If not, thanks for tuning in for how much you did. Okay, thanks for continuing with me, and we'll start working on this take-up lever system now. We've talked a lot about this hinge screw, and it's anchored into the body right there, and I kind of think of that as the anchor for the whole take-up system. But there is another stud that goes in to the needle bar crank, or the needle bar counterbalance, right in here. And those two are what hold the take-up lever, where I call this one the anchor. The other one moves with the needle bar crank, and it has a little crank piece of its own, and that's what makes the lever go up and down. And to get this out, you have to take out the presser bar, which I've done a video, and you have to take out the needle bar, which I've done the video. And you basically are going to take out the hinge screw here, and you have to go in the side hole over here and loosen a set screw that holds this hinge stud into the needle bar crank. And then pull those two out together is the normal way. Okay, but you see right away the problem with this Featherweight, this 221 model, is this is the needle bar bushing way up here. So and it's a pretty big one for a little machine. The other one is right down here at the bottom. You know, it's kind of like a hole through the casting. But this bushing, what Singer says to do is to take out this little bitty set screw here. Whoops. Take out this little set screw right up here and remove the needle bar bushing. And it's very seldom that a service manual that I've ever seen says to remove the needle bar bushings. Some of them do, but many of them warn against doing that, saying don't take that out. So the reason I'm not interested in doing that is because the instructions say, where are they here? I'll run you through the steps they tell you to do. You remove the faceplate, of course, and you remove the presser bar system, and you remove the needle bar system. Okay, then you loosen this set screw up here, and you remove the needle bar bushing. Then you remove the hinge screw and washer, and then you turn the hand wheel until the thread take up set screw is accessible through this little access port right here. Okay, so you line that screw up inside, and you go in here and you loosen the set screw, and then you remove the linkage. Okay, and then to put it back together, it just says like you reverse that motion. You know, you put the hinge stud back in, you put the hinge screw back in, you tighten the set screw, and then it says presser bar instructed, set the presser bar height, and set the needle bar height, and set the needle bar bushing, and replace the face plate. So when you take this out, you're going to have to reset it. And it's confusing to me because the way they say to reset it says go to page 9. And if you remember how I showed you to set the height of the needle bar, the height of the needle bar, it's based on the timing marks on the needle being up near the bottom of this bushing. Well, if you change the height of this bushing, then that throws the needle bar height timing marks off, right? And since you've got the needle bar out, it's like how do I know where to put this? And if I take my needle bar out if I'm off, then my needle bar height will be wrong. So I went to page 9 and read it, and what it says over on page 9 is to set the needle bar height without using the timing mark. Quote, if there's any belief that the needle bar bushing has been disturbed, it will be impossible to set the needle bar by use of the timing marks. Uh-oh. So, it says basically what you have to do to set the height is put the needle in and put it all the way down to its lowest point, and then when it rises 1/10 of an inch from its lowest point, at this point the needle thread loop should be formed and ready for entrance of the hook. So you loosen the clamp screw, and you turn the hand wheel, you put the needle bar at its lowest mark, and then as it starts to come back up, somehow you measure that it comes up 1/10 of an inch, and that's where you set the needle bar height. Once you've done that, then you come back here and you move the needle bar bushing up or down until it reaches the timing mark on your needle bar. So instead of doing all of that, I'm not willing to risk that. You're welcome to. That's how you do it. Take this out and do your thing back here. When you put it back in, I guess you could try and mark it somehow before you took it out. You know, you could measure from the bottom up to the casting maybe very accurately, or you could scratch it, or you could put a piece of tape or something like that, but I'm just not going to mess with it. So I fooled around with it the other day, and I found a way to get this out so I can clean it without taking that out. And I don't know if it's any longer than the other method. The other method sounds like a lot of work to me, and maybe this will seem that way to you. I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and take out this famous hinge screw that we all know so well now. And I'm going to take out my 19-cent washer that I put that in my magnetic dish, and got to kind of fool around with this now because it's all flopping around, right? But right here you can see the crank, the back of the crank for this take-up system, and it's got a stud on it that's going right into the needle bar crank or counterweight. And I'm going to show you a picture of looking through here and turning the hand wheel and locating that set screw in here. You might be able to see it, but I got a huge close-up shot of that. And then I'll show you how you have to use your screwdriver through that slot or hole or port and into the set screw to loosen that set screw a few turns. Okay, so take a look at that picture. Okay, so that makes sense, right? That's what that little hole, in case you were wondering, why is there a hole back here? It's to get access to this set screw in the needle bar crank. And when you push on it with your screwdriver, it's going to want to turn the crank and your screwdriver can slip off. So hold the hand wheel or reach in here and hold on to the crank itself, the needle bar crank, to keep it from spinning. And then loosen this set screw a few turns so that it's loose. There's a flat spot on the stud that goes in there. Let me see if I'm getting that screw out. And it has to be put back in so the set screw is on that flat spot. If any of you watching now watched my 327K video where I had a huge looping problem I worked on for a week, and it turned out that when I reinstalled this piece, I didn't get the set screw on the flat spot, and that changed the timing of the take-up lever. So I'll show you that to be sure we don't do that. So I've got that screw loose now, okay? And I want to maneuver by turning the hand wheel. I want to get this down to a place where I can pull the stud out of the needle bar crank, and all these parts won't get hung up on the side on the bushing for the pressure bar, or on the needle bar bushing that I don't want to remove. And these can be the dickens to get out. But on this one, you're only pulling one. There, that wasn't too bad. Okay. So let me show you these parts, okay? Now, you know, you can go back and pause on that slide if you want part numbers and stuff. But this needle bar connecting link slides onto the hinge stud. See how it's just going to come right off. But it's very close tolerances, all this, because you don't want a lot of play. When this goes back on, you have to look at it when you take it off. I would take pictures. Most of them, the part that goes onto the stud is shorter than the part down here that's got the needle bar stud that goes in with the clamp. Okay? And it goes on that stud from behind towards you. So you have to put the long end, I guess, facing you versus, see, now it would be pointing backward, right? It'd be pointing away if you put it like that. And we'll go over that when I put it back together. And what's left in here is my little, what a cute little thing, a cute little needle bar crank or counterbalance with the hole for that stud, and I got my set screws sticking out the side of it there where I've loosened my set screw. But see, now I can get in here and clean all this muck out of here, which is really what I wanted to do. Okay. And this, you know, you don't have to take anything off your machine if you don't want to, unless it's broken and you have to. Okay. So let's look at the other parts here. This is that crank. See, it's like a crank too, right? And that's what lets that take-up lever come up and go back down and come up and go back down from the crank motion. There is the flat spot. See it right there? And like a lot of flat spots, if the light is right, you can see a little circle where the set screw has been sitting since 1939. Now this crank can come off. This is called a cap screw, and you see how it's all beat up there? I've taken off a few cap screws, but I don't like to do it. The metal always seems a little bit soft, and they never seem to want to come off. Oil and heat are your friends to help. But here's the main thing about that. It's a left-handed screw. It's right to loosen. You turn it right to loosen, not left. So when you see these beat up, you can tell from the way the metal is gouged that somebody got in there and was turning it left and left and left and left, and they couldn't, you know, and they're kind of stripping out the groove, and you can see how it was being turned left, and that ain't gonna work. So if you do want to take off the cap screw, you take it off by turning it right. And it's this little thin-headed screw. It's very thin-headed. And I wonder if I can turn this off now. Turn on my overhead light. It's a very thin-headed screw, and it just has a small screw on it that goes, oh, maybe you can see it right there, back in here. It goes into, it goes, screws in. If you look inside there, you'll see the end of a little stubby screw. So you think, man, why is that thing so hard to get off? It's not real long, right? It's longer than this hinge part here. But this is the actual, like, take-up lever. This part right here. These shiny parts. And this is the crank and stud that go into the needle bar crank, right? And then when this stud, before it goes back in, you put the short end of the connecting link with the long nose towards you from the back, like that. So that's the part that's going to go into the needle bar crank, right? And then the needle bar stud goes here with the clamp to hold your needle bar. And then your hinge screw and washer. So if you want to take this off, you go ahead, good luck, and just remember to turn it right to loosen it, okay? Now these are a little difficult to determine back in here for sure when you have the set screw on the flat spot, because you can't just stick it in like that, because I didn't take out the needle bar, right? The advantage of taking that out is you could put the flat spot, eyeball it right up to the set screw and just stick it in and tighten it. So of course I'm not going to do that, so I've got to get it in there and finagle it around. But how do I know where that flat spot is? Now you can try and tighten the screw while you're moving it and see if you can feel it hit that flat spot. You know, it won't turn left, it won't turn right, it just kind of... But also, if you look at your cap screw, it rotates with the crank and the stud. So if you look at it like this and say, here's my flat, and straight up here is going to be lined up with the flat. So no matter where I turn this, I know it's just to the right of this end of the slot. So if I wanted to put a scratch here, or if I want to get like a what is that called, a Sharpie, and put a little dot there, or a little spot of fingernail polish you can remove later, and you can say, I know that this points towards my flat spot, okay? And when my flat spot is perfectly flat, it's like 12 o'clock and my slot's pointing to 11 o'clock, okay? But you got to remember which end, because if you get the wrong end, you're going to be installing it on the round like I did on that 327K, and it's going to be messed up. It'll look okay, but it won't work. Okay, so that's what I'm planning to do then, is to put these parts back together. The trickiest part is getting the take-up lever crank into the needle bar crank and getting it on the flat spot and going in and tighten it down. Then I can maneuver the rest of this up behind the needle bar like you saw me before and put in the hinge screw and washer. Okay, so let's set up to do that. Aren't you glad you stuck around? So of course I had to go clean everything, the parts. But I want to mention a couple more things. Oh, can you see that black spot there? I went ahead and put a Sharpie because that is where my flat spot is. The other way to do it, if you're able to see inside, you see how this crank rotates around. And there's kind of an oval here, and one end is screwed on with this cap screw, and the other end out here that sticks out, that's where the stud is on that end. And opposite of this curve is where the flat spot is. Okay, so if you can see that, you're going to want that opposite of the set screw in here. Or in my case, I've marked a black spot to show me where my flat spot is. Okay, so we talked about a take-up link arm that goes over and is anchored. I call it anchored. Here is the take-up lever. There is the take-up lever crank. And then here is the connecting bar link with the short side onto the stud from the back, making the long end pointing towards you. Oops. Yeah, these are very close tolerances. And of course now I've cleaned them with crud cutters, so there's no there's no oil. Matter of fact, I'm going to put a drop of oil. Lining these up and getting them in these tight fit holes is an adventure. Now one part of this that actually is part of this I mentioned but didn't say, this is the needle bar connecting link that comes down, and this is the needle bar stud with the clamp, right? And that's what goes in there. So now you're looking at the whole system here. And I usually take this when I take the needle bar, because this just comes out. So I usually keep this with my needle bar parts, but I wanted to show you because I mentioned it. Okay, so I've got to get these, I want to get this in here however I can. I've got to get the parts, see, and this is what I meant by tricky, I've got to get these parts inside the face and eventually behind the needle bar bushing, right? And so I know I've got to keep this link arm up, and I don't know if I'll turn on this light. I don't know how much it'll help in there. See, you've got this thing flopping. So if this wasn't here, you can imagine it would be a little bit easier to just put the hole in the crank down and kind of go in there like that and set it in there without the needle bar bushing in the way, right? So let's see. I'm just going to fiddle around with it. That's all I can do here. And getting that crank into the other crank is the tricky part. And I may have just done it. Hey, I did just do it. How about that? Okay, and I wiped off some of this because I had oil on my finger, but I can see my black mark at the end. So I want to get my crank turned up. Remember the picture I showed you of looking in this port? There's my little electric flashlight. I really like using this, Carol. Yep, I'm going to have to play around with these parts so I can get the to kind of move these around so I can turn that. There we go. I get that up so I can see the set screw through the hole. There it is in there. Okay. I'll try and turn this around so you can see me put the screwdriver in it. So of course, when you get your screwdriver on the set screw, you know that set screw is eventually going to line up with the flat spot. You're going to have to turn the parts to get the flat spot facing your screwdriver and the set screw. And again, I'll tell you, it won't be as tricky as this looks because you won't have the camera in between you and what you're doing. But I've got my screwdriver tip in the set screw, and now I want to turn this so that my little black spot, which is facing my flat spot on that stud, is kind of lining up with my screwdriver, because that's where my flat spot should be. And again, part of this is that you can, as you tighten that set screw a little bit, if you wiggle that flat spot back and forth, you'll kind of feel your screwdriver hitting the sides of that flat spot before it goes to the round, if that makes sense. And take your time with this part, because literally, like on that 327, literally I spent a week trying to figure out. I took the hook out, I retimed it a couple times. I did tension adjustments till I was practically blue in the face, you know. And I just never suspected that I had missed the flat spot. When I went back and watched that part of the video, I was explaining stuff, and I think I just wasn't paying attention to the flat spot. And I just kind of blew it off, just totally missed it. And I had never done that. I'd never missed the flat spot before, so I was just literally like at a loss. It never even occurred to me. And the guy that bought it from me had another 327K, and he put the machine side by side and started looking what's different, and he saw the different angles of the take-up lever. So when he loosened the one on my machine and reset it onto the flat spot, that fixed the problem. It was an easy fix once it was figured out what was the cause. Yeah, I'm not tightened up there yet. I can tell that. I don't think I've got the set screw set all the way in there. So pardon me while I ignore you a minute so I can see and hear better. And when you go to take the set screw, loosen it or take it out, pay attention to how far it's countersunk into the needle bar bushing, how far it's into the hole, because it goes inside a little bit. And if you tighten the set screw on the round part of that stud, the set screw won't go in as far because it's not on the flat spot. So if your set screw is sticking up out of the crank a little bit, that's another way to tell that you have missed the flat spot on. There we go. Let's get that up. Now we're talking. On the, you missed the flat spot on that stud. Looks terrible, doesn't it? Have I totally got you confused? Wouldn't be the first time, right? Now we get all this out of the way here. There we go. There's my low spot. There's my link loop. So I just need to slip my $5 washer back there and line up the hole in the washer a little bit with the hole in the casting so that I can get my stud screw in there. I forgot to put it on my screwdriver. It looks like I'm going to get it in there. Now I'll try turning this and making sure I bounce that around so that it slips up onto the hinge part of the screw, right? We talked about that. Okay. Yep. Yeah, this is going to swing over here. Very smooth. Okay. So, for the heck of it, I'll put the needle bar stud back in there. I'm just going to loosen that clamping screw a little bit. I'll just slip the needle bar in here and we'll run everything, you know, we'll turn everything and see how clean and smooth it's going to be. Get my needle bar back in here, and it's going to go through that needle bar stud and through the bottom bushing. And I'll just kind of eyeball it here. I'll turn the little dot towards me and I'll make sure my clamp is at the bottom. I'll move this up so the top timing mark is Hey, where's my other screwdriver? Oops. So the top timing mark is up here near the bottom of the bushing that I didn't move. So I'm sure it's still set at the factory position. And I'll just clamp this needle bar lightly so it'll stay. And then move my stuff out of the way here. And let's take it for a spin. Make sure this doesn't twist backwards, huh? No twisting backwards here. Wow, smooth. That's smooth, baby. And I don't even have any oil on those parts. They're just so clean and pretty. Whew. Yep, no play in it. Nothing is loose. Okay. A success story. And thanks for hanging in here for this second part of the video and learning about the take up lever. Okay, so come on back and see me. Don't be a stranger to my channel. I have a lot of videos you can watch, and you're welcome to subscribe or comment or donate, whatever you like. Take care, and I'll see you next time.